All right, we are live, and I am here with Embarrassing Mom, Gracie West. She hails from Oregon, United States of America. She is an ex-Democrat with a wonderful walkaway story, and I'm very, very pleased to have her as my very first live stream. And I'm very pleased that it only took me 2 minutes to figure this out. I'm pretty jazzed right now. So thank you guys for joining us. A couple of quick, housekeeping things. I can't really keep up with the chat this entire time. So I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, please chat amongst yourselves. If you don't mind saving your questions till about 10 minutes before the end, I will make a time to pop over to that chat and check out your questions. So I just can't quite do it, which I'll explain later in other videos. So from there, I'm going to let Gracie introduce herself, let you guys know a little about her channel, how she came to be a YouTuber, and anything else she feels pertinent to this conversation. Take it away.
All right. Well, I was raised in a conservative Christian home, and then I went to college. And I started off getting a degree that could actually make money. I wanted to be a dietitian, but I took a women's studies class that fascinated me, and the rest is history. I switched my major and ended up graduating with honors in my undergraduate in women's studies. And ironically, that left me careerless, right? And also just very confused. And it, turned me into a liberal, as it should. That's pretty much the goal, and a feminist, which is, you can't get through the program with honors without converting to feminism, right? So I did. I was a very good student. And when you read that material, hours, 5 to 6 to 7 days a week, and you do that for a number of years, you're indoctrinated. That's just what you're going to think and know and believe about the world. So that early 2000s, and then I went and got my master's degree in the sociology of religion. I wrote a thesis on evangelical feminism, which evangelicals would not call themselves feminists, even the equality-minded ones. And so that's just sort of sociology term. They would say egalitarian. Anyway, so in other words, I got another degree focusing on this topic. And I regret both of these things because, first, the bachelor's degree left me careerless, and second, the master's degree left me in debt. So, and then, of course, all of this content just leaves you bitter and angry, so it's a really good life. Anyway, I have tons of liberal friends that are Christians, and so that's the stew that I have been swimming in. When Donald Trump became president, I think my favorite Facebook quote was, "What the actual fuck?" Like, I felt like the United States just dropped its pants and was standing in front of the world naked. Like, I literally felt that embarrassed. And so I'm sorry for all of you MAGA people. I actually the story gets better. So that's where I'm coming from. And in June, I guess I should step back a little further. So when he became president, I really did need to know why. And I started to look into it. I listened to everybody I could, even Fox News. And I listened to everybody I could find on YouTube, anybody who's talking about why is Donald Trump president. So as I started to listen to people, I realized people are making the claim that it's the left's fault. And I listened to the argument and I realized, oh my goodness, it is. The people are so tired of this stuff, right? They're tired of identity politics. They're just exhausted by all of it, all the ists, and it's not helping. And so hearing that critique made me go, okay, well, if I'm serious about wanting to know why, I have to actually listen and consider. And so I started to do more research and listen. I stumbled across Jordan Peterson and other news that you don't see on the news, you find on YouTube, like the Evergreen professor, Brett Weinstein, who got run off campus, even though he's a total liberal, and he was being called all the ists. And I was watching this play out, and it was really crazy. And I thought, what is happening? I'm starting to see the world as the critique was seeing it, which is everything's falling apart, and this is ridiculous. And so I kind of was red-pilled, essentially. And eventually, so it took a while. it's been how long since he's been in office? Going on 2 years now. But this summer, I finally recognized that I can't vote Democrat anymore. This is nonsense. I actually looked into the politics of it, because when you're in a women's studies degree, they tell you how to think politically, and they tell you that Karl Marx is correct about his analysis, and that socialism is the answer, and all of these things, capitalism is evil. So they teach you these things, and of course you're not a political science major, you don't know, but you're in college, so they're legitimizing this claim, and you're getting a degree, so you think it's true, right? You're just this ignorant person going to college, and they tell you this is true, so you write it, you answer the questions on a test, and look, you got it right. And so I know that sounds really ignorant, but people who go to get an education generally start out ignorant. And so it's insidious, really. What can pass as education is just flat out indoctrination. So the fact that you don't hear two sides of the story, that they don't even have to present that. And I mean, who says that women's studies professors are the expert on politics or economics? They're not. Why would I even let that pass as a thinker, just a person who's thinking? So anyway, yeah, so in this summer, in June, I think a couple months ago, I posted a video on YouTube because I realized, oh, there's other people walking away. That's awesome, Maybe I'll be brave enough, even though I won't share it with all of my friends because most of them are liberal. And I'll just post it. I really didn't think I was talking to anybody at all. But then I realized after people were watching it, like 75,000 people, I realized, I guess when you post something online, you should actually imagine that the entire world could be watching it. So that was a lesson. So anyway, people started subscribing to my channel, which I thought was funny because I had had a video of my dog chewing on a bone and one of me dancing around the house. And I was like, oh, and my walk away video, right? So I thought, well, maybe they actually want to hear what I have to say, not dance, I'm sure. So I posted a couple more videos and I thought, well, I'll just keep talking if people want to hear what I'm thinking, because it is helpful to have feedback. And actually, I have learned a lot from the people who are commenting on my channel, and they've persuaded me a little here and there, like I posted a video recently saying why I'll never call liberals progressives. And then because of a comment, I'm like, oh, I could do that, actually. I could actually call them progressives, because you could differentiate between liberals and progressives progressives being on the extreme, that sort of the far left. And so, just anyway, the engagement with people in the comments has been really rich, really useful, and comforting in a time in my life when I can't really do that with my friends, my closest friends, and and the people who I know from childhood who are conservative are just Facebook friends, and we all know how great that venue is for having real talks. So this has just been kind of a saving grace.
Right on. Yeah, I can relate to that. I have some pretty fantastic viewers myself, and the amount that I've learned it's astounding. And I'm so happy in that position, just to feel like I'm consistently being challenged. And generally speaking, people are pretty awesome. The people that aren't are not my viewers. They're just the random, I believe the word technically is trolls. Is that correct? Yeah. Beyond that, no, my viewers are incredible. And yeah, my life is enriched from their points of views. The amount of links and information and things I've looked into and screenshots I've taken of comments just to use for reference. People are on board and thinking and feeling, and I love it. So thank you for sharing your story. I will really quickly, we have a few more viewers, give another brief shout out that if you guys have questions, I'm not able to keep up with the chat the whole way through. So please write your questions down or keep them up in your noggin if you're good with mental notes. I am not. And you can ask them towards the end of the show. I'll give a shout out and we'll do some questions if you have any for myself or for Gracie. So if you're just tuning in, this is Gracie West from Oregon, USA. So I am going to dive into a couple things that you said. First, I noticed you mentioned that Trump was a big part of your walkaway experience. So I will note that most of the walkawayers in the US have had Trump as a big part of that for them. So even I think the initial guy, Dave, what's his name? I'm blanking now.
Ruben?
Brandon, yeah, Straka, or whatever his name is. So Yeah, so he had a Trump moment too, and once he realized that the media had lied about, I think it was that clip with that disabled reporter, and he had done a hand gesture that was offensive supposedly, and once he was shown that this actually was taken out of context, he said like it blew his mind so hard he had to put his computer away and just go lay down because he just couldn't take it.
Yeah.
And so I think we've all had some of those moments. Jordan Peterson's another one I hear is a common thread. So I think probably that part of this conversation will progress. The emotional side of going through this is something that I don't talk about as much on my channel because a lot of my viewers are conservative, but it is not an easy process, and I think that'll probably come in and out of this conversation. So I'd like to dive into, if you don't mind, because you nailed something that I'd love to get your input on, which is the indoctrination of universities. Now, I went to university, I started a human justice degree, which isn't entirely so different from just social justice, not the stuff I was learning anyway. Now, my life took a different turn, so I didn't get fully indoctrinated through school. I got indoctrinated through circumstances and people, I guess you could say, socialists around me, you could argue. But I'm curious to know about what you said about this evangelical feminism. And you have mentioned in previous conversations with me that basically you're taught how to debunk people's arguments. You're taught how to not make help make it so that they don't feel like they can make a rational argument. And I have had this experience with people who are more extremist feminists. They'll pick out one word, they'll pick out one thing, and they'll nail you on it, and you cannot seem to reason with them. And it's hard because I've never understood the mindset, and it's easy to just get mad. So I'd love it for you if you could give us all some insight on the mindset of someone that maybe has been trained to argue with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you get a degree in women's studies, which they've changed to gender studies, they've changed the name. And the label is significant because the idea being gender is what we're going to focus on now, not women. And that doesn't mean we're going to focus on men also. What that means is something different entirely, we might get into. But yeah, so when you get a degree in this, basically, you take a rhetoric class. And in that rhetoric class, they deconstruct language, and they show you all the ways in which the actual language that everybody around you uses is bad and horrific and damaging to women. And so you're taught all these different ways of seeing how people speak. And then you're taught better ways to say things and how to co-opt language and how to use language strategically to get your agenda through, essentially. You are taught, here's an example. If you want to target a group, you don't talk about the oppression that they're causing someone. For example, at some point, the feminist movement, or whatever you would want to call it, the academic feminist movement, decided, when people say sex, they think women. When people say gender, they think women. When people say race, they think Black people. When people say sexuality, they think homosexuals. And so they decided, what we need to do is we need to change the way people think about things when we say words. So what we're going to do is start talking about white people. We're going to start talking about men. We're going to start talking about, because they're the problem, not the people who are being oppressed. That's not our goal. That's not our interest. We're not really focused on the oppression part. We're actually focused on the person or the group that is making trouble. So we're gonna do that with language. So then you start hearing white. You start hearing male. All the man-spreading and mansplaining and all the things that focus on men. And you hear cis, because transgender and transsexuality is their newest focus. And so you'll hear them calling out people who are not that, and so what you want to do is you want to focus on what the people who you don't really like, is that's the goal. So now, and mark my words, you're going to start hearing skinny in a derogatory way because of the fat positive movement. So you're going to start hearing people use skinny or some kind of terminology to shame people who are not fat. So that's the strategy rhetorically.
That is very interesting, and I think gives me a little bit of enlightenment, because it kind of is like, oh, that makes sense. Because there are times where you're like, I think I'm hitting a wall, and you keep trying to explain context or something deeper or more meaningful, and you're trying all these different ways, thinking, I'll get there. This person will know what I'm saying and say, oh, I see what you mean. Well, I don't agree, but good call. And you leave it civilly. And it doesn't ever end like that. It's usually kind of a rank interaction, in my experience, with not with all people who have feminist ideology, but with extremism for sure. So when you were going through this, I mean, did you, because I'm always curious from the perspective of someone, who I think is fairly similar minded, how did you feel, not just with this particular subject, because this is one that obviously kind of defined and shaped your political thinking as well. How did you feel as far as gut instincts when you were in university and you were learning these different things, and you were focusing more on, like my understanding, you're saying blaming the oppressor, not helping the oppressed, more or less, less on charity, more on anger or resentment, and, like making things even kind of thing. How was your gut instinct? Because I get asked this a lot. How could you have voted Trudeau? How could you have been in this mindset? People can't change that quickly. I don't trust you. I've had that as a big, and I get it. I totally get it, because you've said in your videos, I just watched your Brett Kavanaugh one today, and you mentioned that you like to spend months on a current issue because you don't trust your judgment anymore. That is something that I absolutely, completely understand. I do the same thing, because I'm not 1,000%. I think I'm in a much better place. I'm far more balanced. I see things so much more clearly since I've been, red pilled, as they say. But I'm always curious to hear where people are coming from as far as, their instincts, how they felt. Did they get the heebie-jeebies? Did they push them aside? If so, why? For me, it was more or less brainwashing in a different way, and some, dealing with suffering and a lot of my own personal stuff that just had me drowning in a certain way. And these issues were so far away from me actually taking time to dive into them and research them. So I'm always curious to just hear maybe your perspective, if you don't mind. It's a pretty personal question.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, as far as the feeling that you get when you're studying this stuff, yeah, there were moments for sure when I kind of felt like, this is not fair. Something's not fair here, I mean, an example I gave recently in a video I made was when I was writing my thesis. At some point, my advisor said, why are you using the word liberal? And I didn't understand the question, because I didn't get the memo that we were now progressives, not liberals. And so I didn't understand. And she explained that liberal has become a pejorative term. So now we're going to do a rhetorical move by calling all of ourselves progressives now. And I went along with it, even though internally I didn't like it. And even though I agreed with the ideology at the time, I didn't like it, because I had gotten to a point in my academic career where I understood the techniques that academics in particular use. And I thought it was really unfair, because if you call somebody progressive, what you're assuming is that the people who are not are actually regressive. Their equal opposite is regressive. They're not just staying the same. They're not just traditionalists. They're not holding on to tradition. They're actually walking backwards. They're actually going backward in time, So the assumption is, because we're progressing, someone's going backwards. It's just insidious. And so yeah, it bothered me, and I didn't have the courage to even say, like, that's kind of, if you think about it, and they wouldn't have accepted it. They would have just thought of me as additionally suspicious, because first of all, I was still saying liberal, for God's sakes. But yeah, so that's an example. And then, yeah, toxic masculinity. That's just a way of saying it's not okay to be masculine, even though the critique is real. There's a way of acting out in a male way that can be very damaging. And I don't know any reasonable human being that would disagree. But the reciprocal truth is there. There's a way of being female that is damaging in society. And so to call out masculinity as toxic, or a version of it, of course, is the assumption, or the not the assumption, but what they will say when you say masculinity is not toxic. Well, some is, and some kinds. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're doing a rhetorical move, and I recognize it. And it did make me uncomfortable. And I got the idea of it. I got the idea that we need to, get away from abuse. We need to figure out how to make these things better. But I don't think the answer, and especially coming out and thinking about things differently, absolutely the answer is not going on the attack for a population instead of supporting one that you see in need. So did I answer
Yeah,
both of those?
I think you did. I think you did. That's something that I've talked about a lot in my videos. This idea of empathy, and it's part of what I love about watching your videos, because you're someone who's so very obviously a caring and nurturing person, and it's very clear in the way that you speak and the way that you carry yourself. And so what I'm finding is that is a very common theme among people that are doing this walk away movement. So I mean, I'm jealous because the States has this whole movement and it's really cool. I did contact Brandon to try to get one going in Canada, but I think he's a bit busy. So very cool to have the, many people, like you said, connecting and whatnot. But what I've really noticed is how many of these people are just really awesome, like top of the line folks, very, very smart, very articulate, very kind and gentle, often people that don't even want to speak out, but just feel like they have to now because they've been censored. And I was having a discussion on a live stream the other night. I think I mentioned just before we chatted about this professor here in Canada that had a tenure position, and we were talking about how he thought he would get away with at least being able to, he didn't say anything offensive, but just trying to challenge the narrative. Heaven forbid, he challenged things like gender, like the wage gap and different issues in Canada. And he thought maybe because he's not white, that he wouldn't get called out on things, and because he speaks gently and very thoughtfully, that he would be okay. And he realized again, with the gash, that he's not okay. And that's something that I found, so you're saying you realize that, like, they're calling out good people and you're starting to not feel good about it, but you're the only one saying it. And if you're like, hey, maybe they're not all bad, then suddenly you're associated with some negative thought pattern, right? And I find that association thing with the far left is really strong. If you even say that you like one thing that's considered bad in the narrative, you're done. You can't even just defend one part of someone anymore, or you're suddenly kind of labeled. And this is part of what red pilled me, was realizing, like up here, Jordan Peterson, of course, I'm sure you've heard about the Lindsay Shepherd affair here.
Yeah.
So when I saw Lindsay Shepherd get nailed like that, with, I guess you'd call it the court of, what do they call it, like the people's court, or just in a social way, she just got destroyed as whatever, every name you can be called, a white supremacist and a transphobe and everything else. First it was just for showing his video, and then just for starting a free speech movement. And I thought to myself, if this young, gentle, quiet, very liberal girl from Vancouver, which is part of kind of our California in Canada, there's just, you look at this girl, she's as relaxed and liberal as they get. I guarantee you she's quite progressive. And for her to be getting called out, that's how I realized, okay, there's no one that is safe from this. And when you start seeing good people get slandered, that's what really started to switch me. And when I started seeing how they spoke about Jordan Peterson, someone who I feel like saved my life in many ways, you start to realize, oh my God, like, what have I done? Because I look back, even today, I have memories of someone that I need to apologize because I called them a racist. And it's embarrassing, right? Like, I don't know if you've had moments. Have you had moments like that where like regression? Yeah, if you feel like, if you've had any of these moments, I know you've mentioned friendships and all that, please feel free. I don't know if anybody else is kind of a walk away type person here, but I find these stories really interesting. So yeah, if you have any experiences of I've apologized. I've sent texts to people and said, hey, remember that time that I acted like a total idiot and you couldn't understand why I turned? Oh, I was way too far left and I didn't know it, and I'm sorry and I was wrong. And most of them have been really good, but it's very cathartic. I have a whole list of people that I was kind of an SJW jerk to. Do you feel the same? Have you had that experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My sister is a conservative to the core. She always has been. She's not just that, she's a traditionalist. She values tradition, especially as a Christian, and especially regarding gender. And so, and of course, I thought that was just totally backwards. Even if I hadn't gone to college, I don't think I would be as conservative as she is, or as traditionalist as she is. But like, for example, she believes, I don't know that she believes that every woman should and has to be submissive to their husband, but she enjoys that dynamic of I don't know how to say it, but she's like, yeah, he's the boss, and I'm like, when I was a feminist, I couldn't deal with that. And I really couldn't deal with it. And so I was in therapy in my early 20s for multiple things, but multiple reasons. But I talked about that, and I talked to my therapist about it. And she goes, one thing really caught my attention. She goes, is your sister making these choices? Because I was trying to blame him, the guy, of course it's his fault. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, so she's freely doing that, not against her will. And I'm like, no. And so you're not okay with your sister's choices? I was like, yeah, I guess that's a good way of saying it. And, that's the thing about feminists is they're not okay with all women's choices. They're only okay with some very narrow, actually, list of things that they're going to be okay with for women. So they don't actually speak for women in general. They speak for some. So I have been, and see, after all these years, so I was doing this kind of attitude with my sister, more than attitude, just outright, I would say even kind of like emotional assault. When she had 4 small children, she had just given birth to one and was very anemic and physically not doing well. And because her traditional arrangement, she did a lot of the housework. And her husband worked really hard and many hours, but she took care of the whole house and all the kids, and I just added to the pain. I did not support her choices, and I just gave her the message that she was wrong and doing it wrong. And it's like the last thing you need when you're trying to survive, taking care of babies, is your very sister, just telling you you're doing it all wrong. And so, yeah, I've had to go back to her kind of recently. It's funny because for years and years, I thought, someday when her kids are grown, she's going to come to me and be like, I see the light and I see the error of my way and I'm a feminist. And I really thought, I just never imagined that I would be the one going to her and saying, I was wrong. And I've done it. I've gone to her and just said, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
It's a tough one, right? I don't, people underestimate the courage it takes to be super honest with yourself when you know that you've been a tool. I guess there's no other way to really put it, right? It's not right. It's not so simple. It gets easier, I guess, the more that you realize. For me, this has been just sort of a continual experience where I often will catch myself hearing about a story and thinking, oh yeah, I remember I believed this news, outlet about this, and I can't believe I believed that. And there's just so many times where I think I better go relearn my view on Israel and Palestine. I better go relearn my view on these things. And when you actually open up to these new doors, it's completely different. But it's funny because when you're in the activist mode, because I kind of am equating this type of feminism to activism. I hopefully am not, that's not offensive or inaccurate in any way. But when you're kind of in the mode of strong feminism or anything of the matter, any kind of activism, it really does seem to take on a life force of its own. And I sense that there's a lot of like resentment with a lot of people behind it, or confusion or things like that, because it does seem to come out with a vitriol often against other people. You're slamming someone's character. So in your case, you're talking about your sister. I had a similar situation with my sister and other members of my family, but I wasn't as much in the feminist hold. I mean, they're all intermingled. For me, it was more because I've always been traditionally from a farm background in rural areas. Gender roles here are a little bit different maybe than they are in urban areas. But I do feel like the socialism side for me became really strong. And the person that I had been engaged to at the time and was with for a number of years was what you would call a sociopath, very manipulative and very good at twisting things. And that word gaslight that I just learned a couple years ago, but is strangely, I hate terms, but strangely accurate, made me definitely hate anybody who was rich. And that, of course, is ridiculous. I certainly would not think that now. Not understanding things like conservatives actually give more statistically to charity than most progressives do, generally speaking. I had this idea in my head of what helping people meant. I had this idea that the government had this, responsibility, and that people who made a certain amount should be giving a certain amount away. And it's like, I never even thought about it, because everybody I lived on Vancouver Island, that was a very common theme in the people I was hanging out with. And you end up in this sort of a mode where you're swept up, like I said, in that life force of its own. And so it's the only way that I can sometimes make sense of it, kind of in the background. But I'm curious on your perspective on this too, because what I find is, you said, you were sure you were going to bring her back around. You're going to convert her to your side. And I always wonder, why do people push, whether it's pushing against racism? In Canada right now, we have this new populist party, you could call it, starting. It's really a conservative party, an alternative choice. There's lots of lots of conflict around it, both between conservatives and across the board. The liberals think he's a racist and a xenophobe and everything else. And so there's a lot of, vitriol being spewed, and you have to be so careful with it all. And what I'm noticing is that the more you're pushing people like me, really nice little me, the more you call someone far right and racist and everything else, the more you push people, the more you censor them, the more you stifle them, they don't come over to your side and convert. You can't change people's ideology by force. They get mad. And I'm not sure, like, in your experience, were you someone, like, you seem like you don't seem like someone that pushes your beliefs on people a lot, in the sense of, like, you're not someone that's, out there doing crazy protests like I've seen in the Women's March. But I'm just curious if you've had aggressive interactions, because I know for myself, I have had times where I've gotten very emotionally worked up. And if I look back, there was no facts to it. It was all emotion, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in college, I participated in the marches on campus, and all the stuff that they tell you is helping, which it's not. You're just marching through the street angry and yelling, and and helping what exactly? It just because there are rapes doesn't mean women screaming about it in the street is actually helping change the minds of rapists. It's like, I think there is something to be said for cultural transformation, with society talking about stuff and putting it out there and saying, hey, guess what? We can't really tolerate this. This is not a good idea. For it to be normal when a guy treats a girl in a certain way, to be like, well, boys will be boys. Like, there is a good critique people have, but it does get out of control in terms of the emotion behind it. And I do think it stems from resentment. Often people who go into these degrees have experience with sexual assault or sexual abuse. They have reasons for going into gender studies. So, one of my reasons was that I was raised in an environment that produced my sister, essentially, that kind of mentality. And so my mom was of that kind of mind as well. But when you're being raised in the 80s by a woman who, when you get to college, you learn the word, it's called misogynist, a woman who's misogynist. And so you learn, well, I was curious why, you grew up in the 80s where it's not like that around you, and yet your family talks about things like this that are totally different. So I was curious, and I don't think I went into it with the same vitriol that some people have, but it was convincing, because you do have questions like, why is this the case? Why was this the case historically? Why is it different now? What is it? It just makes you have questions. But I didn't have anyone coaching me through college. I think I was the first woman in my family to go to college. But I don't think that's amazing, actually, turns out, because what happened to me there was not better. It didn't make my life better. It could have if I had gotten a different degree. But ironically, this women's studies degree made my life worse. And the graduate degree just caused debt. It's like, well, I can't afford life because I went to school, I mean, just, I'm wondering anymore, like, what is the usefulness of not real, but college that's not just a tech school? I'm thinking I'm sending my kids to tech school. I'm not sending them to these indoctrination camps. No way. If they want to go to college, they can pick a craft, something that they can, like, put their hands, I don't know. There's just,
it's not a bad thought, actually. Honestly, I look back and think I'm kind of glad. I mean, there's a lot of reasons I'm grateful for my health. It transformed who I am, and it made me way tougher, which I totally needed to be, especially for this particular time in Canadian politics, if I'm diving into that in any capacity. But it also did save me from diving into what would have been about a 7-year university degree. And because I am someone who does want to fight for actual justice, because there's a place for actual human justice, I wanted to eventually get into law, was my goal, and fight actual cases of human justice, genocide, things like that. And of course now, I mean, I look back and realize that I would have been filled with so much I guess so many more ideas, so much more ideology, that at my young age, going through my specific circumstances, is with someone with a big heart to want to help, and being told, this is how you help. You're going to make waves by changing minds.
Right.
And well, like you said, it's not true.
Go ahead. Yeah, you mentioned empathy, you mentioned empathy, and you're right. There are people on the left, and let's just call it slightly on the left, that can be pulled and tugged toward the extreme left, because they can be convinced that Donald Trump is a dictator and he's literally Hitler, they can be convinced of these things because when you tell them, look at all the poor people that are hurting, you're like, oh no, because they have this huge empathy factor going on, right? And when you just isolate them and you don't give them any other information, then it's possible. And I feel like such a sheep, a tool, right? I mean, I'm one of those people that's like, oh no, there's people hurting, you know? But then, yeah, you question it, and I'm just tenacious enough that when somebody goes, you can't question that, it's like, oh, really? Well, then I'm very curious now. You know, I'm more curious. So now I have to look into this because I don't like being told that. And, you know, very few people do. And so I was actually having a conversation with a liberal friend yesterday, and we were, he's the only one I've really decided to really talk to about this yet. There's another woman who I could talk to, but she's going through chemo, and I'm not going to do that to her. But he's kind of like practice for how to talk to what was my own kind about new ideas that seem extremely bigoted. Like he was asking me, what did he say? He said, what do you think about Trump? You know, this is like a litmus test. And I said, well, I think he's a narcissist. You know, I have to, sorry, MAGA people. I don't know if I'm going to vote for him, but I definitely would never vote for Hillary. And I actually didn't, believe it or not. So, yeah. And anyway, but I was like, I think he's a narcissist. I mean, he's a kind of a dick, but you know, I like what his policies are doing. And he's like, what? Would you ever vote for him? And I said, maybe. And he goes, that's the problem right there. And I thought, really, is it? Because the thing about it is it's a purity issue, okay? People that get really on the extreme of anything become fundamentalist in nature. And what that, having studied religion, what this looks like is kind of what Jonathan Haidt talks about, which is this purity thing, right? There's this dynamic of, well, but he's not talking about religion, but with religions, there's a purity issue. You have the insiders and the outsider. There's certain things that are unclean, you just don't touch. And with on the extreme left right now in the US, it's Trump. You can't touch that with a 10-foot pole without being totally contaminated. Just the thought that you might consider voting for means that you are utterly contaminated. There's no hope. And you can kind of push people that are empathetic but not extreme completely over to the right by telling them what they can and can't do.
I think that's essentially the hashtag walk away is kind of like a, you know, screw you, don't tell me how to live my life kind of a movement. Yeah. I don't know. I don't like it either. And I'm a pretty gentle gal, but there is something about being told what you can and cannot say, you can and cannot feel. That one kills me. Don't tell me how to think. Don't make up my mind for me. I am a capable person. You know, these are very frustrating things. And I see that frustration over and over again when I watch these videos of people that are just, you know, I'm a good person. Stop telling me I'm a piece of crap. Stop it. Like, yeah, our media is really bad for that. We have our state controlled media, CBC, and it's I'm sure as soon as I say that word, my viewers will all be like, effing CBC. Everybody hates the CBC here. They're terrible. They're so blatantly biased. And of course, our tax dollars pay for it, which makes it even worse. And so, you know, they're just continuously telling people, not every person, but particularly white people, about all the bad things that white people are doing. And there's always little insinuations and there's biases and then lots of gender stuff. And I mean, all of it. It's really blatant and it's really frustrating. And I think if they think they're actually going to bring all of the rational people over, no, the rational people are going to eventually get pushed out. And maybe it takes some of us a little more time than others, but you know, people will eventually get sick of it. And the Trump thing is so interesting because Trump, I wasn't quite where you were when he got in because I was sort of in my conversion process and I was the one telling people. It was part of my red pill experience. I'm sure you'll appreciate this. I had been on Facebook at the time. I'm no longer, as of 2 years almost. And I was part of like some gals in Canada that also are young and have, you know, shitty illnesses that affect their life. And we were kind of just chatting and, you know, it was like a support thing, which I'm not really normally into. I'm a pretty private person, but some nice girls. And anyways, but they were all from West Coast and all very, very, very liberal. And I hadn't realized what a social justice warrior was at that time, but now looking back, it all makes more sense. And I remember one of them commented when, you know, everybody was freaking out. Like I had someone have a panic attack when Trump got in and people were crying and it was just a disaster. And all I said was like, listen, you guys, because even at that time I knew this is not nearly as scary. There's no way. And so I said, everyone just needs to take a deep breath. Let's say he's not a good guy. He's just one man. There's been bad leaders before. There'll be bad leaders again. We can deal with this. There's tons of people in the States and just one of him. Like, just everyone take a deep breath. Panicking is not going to help. It was the most benign message. And I got nailed on my white privilege and my cisgender privilege. And I was like, whoa, what are you talking about cisgender privilege? Which I had to Google at the time. And this was like one of these introductions into like, what is this mindset? And that's what really made me start to think about Trump right from the get-go when he was elected was, wait a second, there's got to be more to this. And so slowly I realized that, yeah, he's not, I think I said to you, he's not someone I would marry. Definitely he's got an ego the size of a small country. That being said, it makes it easy to do work with him on, not like our officials understand that here in Canada, but it's actually, you just got to stroke his ego. It's not that hard. Make him think that you really like him and think he's awesome. And you should be good to go. But anyways, I find Trump to be quite an enigma because he's really shifted things down there. And he has become, like you said, this one big, like, if you like him, you're a bad person, you're deplorable. If you don't, then you're safe. Like, is that the mentality? Because I think if you look at policies, another YouTuber, Canada Man, you guys should check him out if you haven't, a very sensible guy. He does really nice short videos, and he talked about this breaking up personality from policy. So personality and then words and then and actions. And when you look at Trump, do you like his personality? Do you love what he says? Half the time. What about his policies? Well, the states are doing better because of him, and you can't argue with some of this stuff. So that's when facts and logic and reason come in. And I hear people say now what a racist Trump is, and I'm like, oh, I used to think that too, and now I just kind of smile because I think it's great that plus he's hilarious. I gotta admit, I watch him speak and he just cracks me up. It's refreshing to have someone just say what they mean, and I find that absolutely, God, I wish our prime minister was half as in love with his country as Trump and B as charismatic, because his virtue signaling gets to be a little much. Sorry, I digress. I had to do a Justin bitch session just for 5 seconds. I'm sorry. I'll go back to the point, which was Trump. So yeah, I'm happy to hear your view on that. So when he was voted in, where were you in your red pill experience? Was that kind of the beginning then for you? Like, was that a huge part or just a side note of it?
Absolutely, 100%. Is a huge part, because I don't think I had been being red pilled until then. It was like being dead asleep and somebody just taking ice water and dumping it on you. It's like waking up in total shock and just going, what's happening? It was like, I have to pay attention. Something's happening. Something very bad is happening, is how I felt, And yeah, I took my kids out for dinner that night to see the elections because we were going to celebrate history being made, the first female president. And I told my daughter, because there was all the polls, right? The polls were like, Hillary's going to make it. And I was like, well, I don't really like her, but at least I can celebrate the fact that that's the first female president. So, and I didn't vote for her, but anyway, I took our kids out and I was like, hey, Eva, my daughter, I was like, so history's going to be made tonight. There's going to be the first female president. And we were sitting in a restaurant where you could see the screens. And they're like, oh, there's another red state or blue or the other. They were getting all like, wait, what? And then pretty soon my kids had to point it out because we were in total denial. We're like looking up at the screen and my kids go, looks like Trump's winning. And I was like, oh my God, I think he's winning. And my kids were like, yeah, look, he's winning. And I was like, oh my God. It was terrifying. We left in shock. And the kids were like, so we didn't get a female president. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Sorry about that. Sorry about telling you we were getting one. Because why would I say that? Because I don't know, right? Why would I know that? So it's interesting, too, because my kids had heard us say before that Trump didn't like Mexicans. We were at a Mexican restaurant and they were, they're little and they were like Trump, and they had heard his name a lot on TV. So they were like, Donald Trump. And I was like, shh, because we're in a Mexican restaurant. And I just assumed that everybody would turn and look at us and be like, how racist can you be? Because the whole message was he hates Mexicans. And so we were like, don't say his name in here. And they were like, why? And so we had to explain later, like, he doesn't like Mexicans. We did this whole thing with them. Okay. And we're sitting at the table kind of recently, and my kids were like, well, Donald Trump's something negative. I don't know. We haven't been talking about him in particular at all, ever. But I go, you guys, hold on. So, how we told you all of this stuff? And they're like, yeah. We're like, so, yeah, we're just thinking twice about all that. And they're like, really? And I go, but this is the thing about, you just have to learn more all the time. And it doesn't mean we want to be his best friend. It doesn't mean we think he's an awesome, good person, maybe even, but I don't think he hates Mexicans like we thought he did. I think we've been misinformed. And, it doesn't mean that he can't be Eurocentric because he's white. I don't know. But it doesn't mean he actually hates Mexicans. It doesn't mean he actually hates everybody else. I think that's the nuance that people forget, is that because as a leftist, if you say something wrong or slightly inaccurate, if you don't say it just right, that just proves that you absolutely fail the test as being, at the bottom of the pyramid, right? The pyramid, I've talked about the hierarchy of oppression. So the bottom of that pyramid is your ally people. So you've got all the oppressed people. If going up toward the most oppressed person. So the bottom is just allies. It's like the people who are all the norms, right? All the cisgendered norm people, all that, and white and men and stuff. And but you can get right out of that triangle so fast. Like, you say the wrong thing, you're not even in the triangle. You're not even on that little map. You're like off in the abyss where they throw people in hell. Like, it's just seriously hardcore. So that alone, when you recognize that, you're like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with this.
Fair enough. And this is an interesting one because I don't have kids and my dogs are not easily indoctrinated. Can't even seem to listen, which is interesting. So on that front, you live in a fairly, generally speaking, it's a fairly democratic state, is it not, Oregon?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
I'd love to go there. It's beautiful. How is it with your kids when it comes to their schooling? I know you've talked a bit about the sex ed stuff. If you want to get into that, you can. I'm just curious. I've heard a lot, even in Canada, about progressivism and how it's really getting to the young kids, especially with gender stuff, but other ideologies about privilege and things like that. What's it like in Oregon right now? Or is it just Canada that's gone completely bloody socialist and it's you guys have Trump to hopefully hold that back a bit or hold the reins?
Yeah, I think it's crazy. I got an email from a mom recently that's like, just so you know, there's a book in the library and it had this huge list, and on it was like talking about different ways of masturbating and how to look up porn on the internet and how to hide it from your history so your parents can't see. And I was like, okay, what age is this aimed at? Grade schoolers. Grade. It's like, are you serious? Seriously? Like, this is where you want to go? Wait, there's this idea that children should understand that they have all the rights in the world, but it's like, but they shouldn't. They're children. Like, they shouldn't have all the rights in the world. Like, parents should have more rights than their children in terms of being able to control the content they see on the computer, etc. It's getting to the point where you go, where's the line? You guys have no boundaries. You don't want borders on the country. You don't want borders on children. Children need boundaries. Like, they just need someone to say no. Even if you cry, I don't care if all your friends have a phone, you're never going to get one until you're 15. I don't know, whatever it is. Like, it's just, the parents should be able to just make their children's lives what they are, as long as they're not, doing detrimental harm to their body or mind. It's like, it's ridiculous. They really are indoctrinating kids at a very young age. It's in the material, even if you don't know it. And yeah, like when my son will say something like, well, yeah, but boys this and boys that. And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want to hear you talking like that about boys ever. Do you understand me? And he's like, yes. But, where are you getting this? Not in my house. So, and I couldn't believe I actually had to tell him. It occurred to me, I actually have to say this to my son. I said to him at the dinner table, and both my kids, I said, you know how it's never going to be okay to talk bad about people because of their race or their gender? Don't let anyone do that about you either. I'm serious. Don't let them do it. I couldn't believe I have to tell him that, because I'd already, I'd been indoctrinated to think these people are the norm and they have no problems in the whole world. But I realized the other day, I actually have to teach them this because no one else will. Yeah.
How very sad. And I chuckle because it's so ridiculous that we're at this point. but it's not really that. It's a bit sad. We talk a lot about like the breakdown of the family unit, and I mean, we didn't get into it tonight, but maybe on a second live stream, should you be interested, we could get into a little more of the morality as it comes to our Judeo-Christian faith, because I know both of us are people that have left the left and returned not only to conservatism but also to our Judeo-Christian roots, which has been a whole other interesting experience. And when it comes to guilt and shame and going into progressivism, wow, that's a whole more than 10-minute ballpark. I'm assuming you will agree with me on that one. Just as a quick shout out, I threw it up in the chat box, but if anyone missed it, I will be taking a few questions here right away, if that's cool with you, Gracie. We'll do, yep. It looks like I was gonna just do it at the last 5 minutes, but there's quite a few questions. People want to know some stuff. So I'm gonna hop over here to the chat and try to be somewhat tech savvy with it. All right, so let's see where this starts. All right. Oh, someone said they forgive me. That's so nice. Thank you, guys. Sometimes people don't, so it's cool. I did vote Trudeau. People aren't so big a fan of that. All right. I'm just moving down here. Someone says they love to ask 2 questions, but they're sleepy. That is cool. If you want to ask them, Swift Justice, when the live stream is done and it just goes on my channel, I will answer them another day because I can keep in contact with Gracie. All right, see here, better days. I saw one. I'm sure Burke had one. Sorry, I'm not having great luck here. Okay, let me just scroll down. Julie Mora, gender studies. Okay, so see, this is why I didn't do the chat the whole time, because it's overwhelming. So I think Burke W asked, should they be basically, is there a way to improve the wall, or is there a better wall? I think I'm just trying to find it. Oh my God, people are still talking. This is so confusing. Trying to get actually back up on the chat. Okay, question. Do you think without Trump, would she have been elected? Now, every time someone talks, I lose the question, but you can answer that one. I will push it over to you and get some more questions going in a little bit more efficient way. So basically, I think the question was, without Trump having been the contender, would Hillary have been elected? That's the question from Ben Tomlinson.
I don't think so. I mean, who would really know? But I don't think so. And here's why. Even though I was indoctrinated into feminism and I was a feminist for 15 years up to that point, I still did not vote for Hillary. And here's why. I was such a good leftist. I boycotted Walmart for like a whole decade because of their policies that were detrimental to women in terms of hiring practices. Okay, so that's how SJW I was. Well, she sat on the board of directors that whole time. And, you know, I could have used Walmart because I was poor. And I'm just like, I can't vote for you, honey. Sorry. No, I just, And then I've heard Republicans, or not Republicans, but other people say, look, yeah, Republicans, I am Republican, or I was, and I'm so tired of it. What they're doing is BS. And I needed to vote for, definitely not Hillary, but I wanted to vote for someone who would just mess with them. And people who are just generally upset with the whole Republican Democrat thing altogether. I've heard a lot of people say, look, he just messes with all of them. And I love that about him. So I don't know. You know, I just don't know if she would have been elected. I kind of doubt it because she just has enough, you know, black marks on her chart, let's say.
Yes, I would agree with you. It's not like she was a saint. I don't think that was in any way something you could use to describe her. So I just basically took a couple screenshots because people are chatting, which I'm super happy to see because it means people are having good conversation, which is the whole point of this. So a couple screenshots here, and if I missed your question, I really am sorry. It's not on purpose. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just literally new at this. So you certainly can write that question once this is uploaded onto my channel, and I promise I will get back to you and even ask Gracie via email, and I'm sure she'll be happy to oblige. So, oh, you know what? I was wrong about Ben Tomlinson's question now that I see it in full. The question was, do you think without Trump, would she have been exposed to more individualist ideas? Now, that would be the question being you as the she. So I apologize, but I like.
Oh, okay. I see. I don't know. He really literally was like getting ice water just splashed on me in a deep sleep. So maybe, you know, because I think Jordan Peterson came up in my YouTube feed, and YouTube decided, you know what she wants to see? She wants to see a bigot SJWs do a smackdown of a bigot. And I was like, yeah. So I clicked on it, and and life just changed. I couldn't believe his articulateness. I mean, is that a word? I couldn't see. I'm not that articulate, but the man was just amazing. I couldn't believe it. I listened. From that point on, the second I heard him speak, I listened to every single piece of his online content. It didn't matter what class it was, how long the lecture was. I didn't care what the topic was. I listened to everything that man has ever said online for about 2 hours every day. Okay. It could be that I would have been red pilled just because YouTube. And maybe that's why they demonetize everybody and try to not show videos, because they're like, oh crap, we're actually turning people into our enemies.
That's a very good point. I think you wouldn't be threatened if there was no threat, right? Yeah, Jordan Peterson was a big part for me too. I was the same. At one point I thought maybe I'm watching too much, but it did settle down. I needed the message. I was craving the reality check so bloody badly. I was just desperate for frickin' truth. No more of this like, man, nothing really matters, man. It's all good. Light and love. Like, come on, enough. No more. I need some bloody real, like, pick up your damn suffering. I needed that so badly. So yeah, I was definitely red pilled by Jordan Peterson. I didn't have a Trump. I had a Justin Trudeau, but I did have a Jordan Peterson. Thank God. Good Canadian man. Here's another question for you from Luke Viano. What does she think we can do? So what do you, Gracie, think we can do to create a space where becoming a wife and a mother is a good thing for one's life again? Good question. Go for it.
Yeah. So I think that this is something that men and women need to work on together. It's kind of like a relational agreement, really. I think making life good for women as a wife and mother means that you give up the idea that you are going to be economically independent, okay? And that means that you have to very much trust the man that you're with. You have to trust that he's good, he will be good to you. You know him well enough and for a long enough period that you're not going to get yourself into a situation where, I mean, often when somebody is abused, one of the reasons they don't leave is that they are economically dependent, and there's threats of death and violence. And so it just becomes a really bad, difficult situation to get out of. Having said that, there's a lot of men out there that could really use a traditional woman. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's like, there's a lot of men out there that are just plain straight up, just like, I'm just done with women, the MGTOW thing, the men going their own way. And I don't blame them. Good Lord. I mean, these days it's like, accusation is guilt, and why would they ever want to be in a room alone with a woman again at this point? It's not even worth it. It's like that 20 minutes, 2 hours, however long it is not worth the rest of your freaking life. And so and yet, if you can make an agreement, like arrangement, like if you're the kind of woman who is not deeply ambitious, you have to start there. You have to be like, I am not the kind of person that wants to run the world, and some women are. And so if you're not, that's great. Start there. And then make a commitment to yourself. If you find a man that you can trust, and just make a commitment to yourself and him that this is it. I mean, I've been married for 21 years, and marriage is hard. In some ways it sucks, but in some ways it's great and it's good. It just depends on the year, the month, the dynamic, financially or otherwise. And it really just depends on your own internal fortitude and commitment and determination, and the other person's as well. So I think there is something to be said when Peterson starts talking about tradition. It's like, there is something to be said for, the thing is, if you decide to be a traditional woman, it's your choice now. And that's like, great. Feminists gave us a choice. Well, guess what? We can choose that if we want. We can choose to be a traditionalist and say, you know what? The guy makes the money. You could even say he's the boss. I don't think I could go that far because, anyway. But we have a good agreement. We have a good agreement. And, he makes the most money. I work part-time. I get to be with the kids after school. But yeah, you just come up with your own agreement. And I think the best way to do it is to find a conservative guy that still has faith in women, and be a conservative woman who still supports a man no matter what.
I think that word support is a big one. I think that's something that women aren't really taught about, supporting the man right now. And I think that's something that, like, for me, because I'm in a very, mutually thoughtful and loving relationship where we both care about each other's, well-being, it's very beneficial to honor and build up the person that I'm with. It's not like men don't ever need to be told they're doing a good job. It's not like they don't need to be supported. It's not like they need to be ragged on all the time, right? Like, I worry about men right now because I don't feel like people are getting taught extreme ideas about feminism and not these other nice ideas about, I guess, reciprocity in relationships, you could say. And it's like, for me, I find helping my partner or making him lunch feels good. I don't mind. I don't mind it when the house is clean. If he works, like you said, I work part-time. Mine's more for health reasons, but he goes to school or he works and we have an arrangement. We're happy. And I actually got called an old-fashioned sex slave. Thank God all the women aren't like you, because we'd be going backwards and you're just, whatever. It was amazing. It's like, I'm a sex slave because I don't mind making lunch for my partner and I don't want to take half his money that I didn't earn. Wow, that's a new one to me, but whatever. So it's just amazing, like the level that these things go to. Right. So let's see here. We've got a few more questions. I won't try to cut it off or anything because it's an interesting topic. One little fun question. I don't know if this question was for us. What's better, a broadsword or a battle axe? That's a funny question. I think I saw them talking about Lord of the Rings. I don't think that's for us. Let's see here. There was another couple girders here. Someone asked if we would be, there it is. Swift Justice 2020 asks if either of us will please adopt him or her, I don't know, as a nephew. That's funny. We don't have to answer that, but okay, good. You got your answer.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I have an open door policy at my house with the neighbors, the neighbor kids in particular. I don't know how old you are, Swift Justice, but if you were a neighbor kid in the neighborhood, you could just walk in. So
good to know. Jim Trainer asks, are Trump's excesses of language helpful, harmful, or neutral? Also a good question. Take it away.
What was the excesses of language?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, his excesses, hold on. Yeah, his excesses of language, are they helpful, harmful, or neutral?
I don't know how anything he could say would be neutral. Excesses of language. I don't know exactly what that means, but I do think
he's very hyperbolic. I mean, he uses a lot of caps locks on his Twitter, I've noticed. He's very, like, Ben Shapiro calls them, he put out a series of tweets about something and he called them the Godfather 1, 2, and 3. And of course he does his crazy impression. Anyway, maybe that's what that means. I'm assuming. I'm not sure if they're still around to clarify. But I guess, is his hyperbole good or bad? Good. That is an interesting question.
It is a good about. Well, I don't think neutral could be applied to him in any case. I think that because, I mean, if he were neutral, I wouldn't have woken up from a dead sleep, right? Politically. Mm-hmm. I think I would have been red-pilled in general, but I think politically speaking, I was just like believing what people don't. I was branded, the Democratic Party had branded themselves and I bought the brand. It's like Nike or Adidas. It was like, yeah, they're my brand. That's how political I was. So he woke me up politically. I think that's good. The fact that he was, in my opinion, so hideous woke me up to realize that I don't know what I'm talking about at all when it comes to politics.
Mm-hmm. So in that way, you would say it's positive. Actually, I would agree with that. I think a lot of people red-pilled because of his hyperbole, because there's something about him that seemed to grip people's imagination and attention, and it seems like it caused. I've heard him said it's like a bull in a china shop. He just came and just tore down everything that was happening. So
that's the thing. He polarizes people, so I can't just say, "Oh, it's all good," because like he does the opposite too. People have fled to the left extremes. I mean, I can't believe how many Christian liberals I know that are so extreme. I can't even listen to what they say on Facebook. It's like, it's ridiculous. He polarizes people, And so partly I have to that's why I don't trust myself. It's like, I see everybody running to one side or the other, and I didn't happen to follow my crowd into the corner that they were going into. And so I'm like, where am I running? I don't want to run. I don't want to just polarize somewhere, but I don't want to not have an opinion. So I'm working on that.
Fair enough. I think work in progress is allowed here. Never judgment on my channel of my confused, red-pilled state of mind at times. So I'm going to do one more last question. And then because we just passed an hour here, I'm going to try to keep these. You're someone I could talk to for like probably 3 hours, but for the sake of, people's attention spans and all that jazz. I'm going to do one more question. Sorry if I missed anyone's here. Please do either throw them in the comments after, or I think I can actually check the live chat later. So the next question from Joe Hayes. What does Gracie think the end game of the feminist fifth column is? Is there a goal?
Yeah, so the feminism that is taking hold of society right now is the most radical kind. So this third, is it even a fourth wave at this point? Who knows? I've been out of the actual academic study for a few years here, but their goal is to convince people that biological sex is socially constructed. And so to do that, you really have to mess with people's head. You have to throw away science. You have to throw away the Enlightenment. You have to mess with people's idea of what it means to be female and male. And one way that they do this is the only biological argument they have is the intersex population. And that's a very small population. So I don't think the word spectrum could be used when you talk about sex, like biological sex. There is a spectrum of gender, obviously, because people might be super femme, super masculine, or ambiguous. Like, obviously, there's a spectrum. People decide how to dress differently. But when it comes to biological sex, they want to convince people that there is also a spectrum. Now, I don't know that this is accurate even language, because the percentage is so small that of people who do not have an XX or an XY chromosome that it's such a small percentage that you really can't call it a spectrum. It is binary, and there are abnormalities. I'm sorry if that offends anybody. I don't mean it to. I feel like the reason why it's okay to say it's an abnormality is because it actually causes people physical harm, like other ways. They have other physical ailments that come along with having an unusual chromosome, a biological sex that is unusual chromosomally. So, but their end game really is to convince people that there is no such thing as a male, there is no such thing as female, and to make everybody the same, because this is how you make a communist state. You have everybody is equal and everybody is the same, because that means same. Equal means same. And the state raises the children. Like, this is their utopia. So this is the goal. This is not the goal of 70s feminism. This is not the goal of the suffrage movement. This is the new goal. And not all kinds of feminism has this perspective. However, the one that's in charge right now does.
So the loudest ones are getting all the attention and pushing it forward, as always, right? Hurting the regular folks.
They're the ones that have won the argument in academia, and therefore they're the ones that get to push it forward into society.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, an excellent question and an excellent answer. To finish this all off, thank you so much for coming on and chatting about this. I have to say, Embarrassing Mom, Gracie, it's been a pleasure having you. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. I hope we can do this again. You guys, please check out her videos. She has so much more knowledge and wisdom from where, beyond what we've discussed tonight. I hope that you guys can take some of this knowledge away as a little bit more of an inside scoop on where the mindset comes with people who are of a feminist mindset. I know, Gracie, that you feel like maybe you shouldn't have gone through with your training. And I know I have things in my life I think, oh my God, that was such a waste of time. But for whatever it's worth, whether you believe things happen for a reason or not, you can always make something good out of it. And I think you're doing something good with what you've been through. And I think sharing this message is so important. And having an inside perspective is really, really helpful. So thank you so much for coming out and sharing this with myself and my viewers and your viewers. If you have anything else you'd like to say, I wouldn't mind passing it over to you just to kind of give your final words before we finish off here. So.
Okay, well, that is encouraging to imagine that my pile of manure can actually be fertilizer that could create beautiful flowers. Because that's really what I've been sitting there feeling like. I've just got this is just a pile of shit, and it's great to imagine that I can do something wonderful with it. So maybe I'll garden, So yeah, and I'm just mad enough about it that I can really go after it, and I know just enough to actually know how to. So thank you for having me on, and thank you to all of Kelly's viewers for hearing me out, and all of my viewers who might have popped on too. You should check out Kelly's stuff. She's good too. She's great. And I do want to say one last thing. Justin Trudeau is despicable.
Well, you just probably earned yourself a whole bunch of fans just by saying that. So Brilliant. Well, I guess that will be it. I'm going to stop the live chat now. Just so you know, Gracie, you'll still be on with me after, but we will be no longer live. Thank you, everyone, so much for popping in. I'll check out those comments later on when I have a chance to relax later on. And thank you again. Have a wonderful, blessed evening. As always, be good to each other, not because our lovely Justin Trudeau tells you to, or the CBC for that matter.
That's right.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.